The sound of Friday, the Take Two podcast music. This is Heidi Hatch with KUTV 2 News. Maura, Carabello in the house. And back by popular demand, you have a fan, Frugal Dougall, on the East Coast. And so
nice.
we brought you back for more action.
There you go. Excellent. Always good to have at least one fan.
Yes.
That's all you really
You
need.
may have others. This is just one
fan.
specific fan. Thanks for being with us and thanks for listening. We are in the final
Happy
throes.
Friday.
Yes, happy Friday. It's the final day of February. Yay for us.
Next to the last Friday of the session.
Yes, we've got 1 week left in the session. The sun is shining. I'm just like high on life right now.
Nice.
But you guys missed the pre-podcast where we were all discussing like wedding planning. Yes, because that's what I do as my other full-time job, not at work for my daughter right now.
Daughter's getting married.
Yes.
My son's getting married. So
Yes, and you guys are going to Europe, which I think is going to be way less than where we're planning in California.
What's the date for
It's
your
insane.
son's- Oh,
It's coming up
Okay.
in spring.
Soon. Okay.
In spring.
Gotcha.
Yeah, don't give out the details because
No.
we don't
I
need
usually
stalking
don't
them.
advertise when I
Yeah.
travel.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing. So yeah, we're in the planning stages of that, and I've decided that I'm just going to own my own venue when this is done because there's a lot of money to be made in weddings.
So that's your plan C now.
Yeah,
Are
it's
you
my
going
plan.
to keep the day job and do a
Yeah,
wedding?
that'll be my
Yeah.
side hustle.
That's-
Yes.
That
Sounds reasonable.
I know, and Maura, when
That's
you
for
got married,
something
you
that
did it in Italy too, so the whole escape
get
and do it
married in
someplace
Italy.
exotic is like the way to do it.
It's kind of simpler in some ways because you can take which traditions you want and,
Flush the rest?
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
It was nice to.
Yeah, so we're in that debating phase of what we keep and what we
This
throw
is
away.
the rough part.
Yeah.
Making the bigger decisions. And then, well, I don't know.
Then we'll get to the fun
What
stuff
were we
afterwards.
kidding? It's all rough.
Right. So
It was simple
now
for me. I want chocolate cake and a black tux. There you go. That was all.
that's
I
all
asked
you
for.
asked for? I like that.
And my
Keep it
wife's hand.
simple.
When you have a son getting married, not to stereotype, but the mother of the bride,
Yeah.
I think is
Although I've heard a few Groomzilla stories out there before
Really?
where I'm like,
Groomzilla.
ooh,
Really?
yes, I'm kind of surprised
Never heard this
sometimes.
term.
I haven't
Yes.
either. I kind of like it.
Yeah,
Is this going to come out as a Disney movie?
it might. That'll be my other project
Yeah.
I'm working on, so watch out for that. It might be PG-13. So this morning there's so much to get to. I just
Yeah, there's a lot.
right now, like on a national stage, there's so much going on, so much in Utah. Nationally this morning, if you caught part of it, President Zelenskyy was in the White House and it turned into a little bit of a blow up that I haven't seen in the
A
Oval
little bit
Office
of a
before. There were 40 minutes in all, we should say, and there was quite civil conversation going on, but it got a little spicy there for a minute. And then there was the whole Epstein file release that was supposed to happen yesterday, which was a debacle. There was no release, and I'm like, guys, don't print the binders unless there's something in there that we want
That
to know
was
about.
really weird.
That was
to
weird.
do the whole sort of theatrics around here's the new things only to release nothing new.
Yeah.
It felt weird.
Nothing burger?
It felt like not very cool that you would wrap what seemed to be a press event around that.
Yeah, it was weird. So anyhow, I'm not holding my breath for the real stuff.
And looking at Zelenskyy, if we go back to that, I mean, basically he was getting berated by the president and the vice president. I mean, here he is, a guy leading a country in war, attacked by Russia, and getting berated because basically he wasn't deferential enough. I'm sorry.
That was hard. That lack of respect when America's not showing that respect to a leader who's fighting an incursion on their. I mean, like it's so American what Ukraine is doing right now to be pro, America. But I agree with that lack of respect. It's something to disagree on policy, and it's something to say, hey, we're not going to do what you want us to do. Like, that is what tough conversations with world leaders are about. But the disrespect was entirely unnecessary and not worthy of the president's
So you don't think there
office.
was any right for frustration or
No.
blowing up there?
Not in a public setting like that, not in a public
Not
dialogue
from
like
the
that.
US perspective.
Not from the U.S. I mean, we should be respectful and the heavy hitters, and we are absolutely losing our position as a world leader, which is a bummer for me.
I was thinking that there was going to be an announcement today because we keep hearing about all these mineral rights there where the U.S. would start to get some of the money back that they've, I don't know what the right word is, invested or sent towards the war there. But yeah, that obviously didn't happen. So it seems like we're at a stalemate.
Well, I hear the comments, which is we want to get out of Ukraine, but if we're doing the mineral deal, we want to get into Ukraine. We want Americans there.
Right.
We want boots on the ground.
Right.
We're going to help the Ukrainians with the war. And it's just like, well, which are we doing? Are we getting out or are we getting in?
I guess we're figuring it out. So stay tuned till next week. But on the local front, there was a strange press release that came out yesterday saying there was an 8 a.m. news conference today and all the legislative leaders and the governor were going to be there. And I'm like, well, obviously it's good news because they're all going to show up together in Kumbaya. Their good news is that they're giving a raise to teachers, which amounts to, I think, about $1,500, which is probably close to a 3% raise from where their base or starting salary is, which I forget, is it 60 or 65,000? That's the start. So it puts them, I think, in the top 10 nationally for starting wages for teachers, and then number 1 in the Mountain West. Maura, was this a good move, or is it too little too late because they took away their collective bargaining in the same legislative session?
I mean, I think it can be both, right? It can. I think the teachers union is very frustrated about the collective bargaining being taken away, but it's frankly a different issue. So
yeah.
I don't think I think you can be both frustrated with that and agreeable to this. I think that the legislature and the governor should be applauded for over the last couple of years really focusing on teacher salary and valuing that, and they've done a lot to commit to that higher teacher salary, and I think that that's a really important thing. I really do want to applaud them. I get a little hesitant about applauding people for doing the right thing, though, so I want to temper it by saying, well done, legislature, for doing the thing that our teachers have earned, because these folks are earning it, and education should be, in many ways, smart education investment should be the center of what we're doing.
The devil is still in the details. They haven't said exactly how they're going to pay for it because they do have to take away something else. Social Security might be on the table. Is that a concern for either of you that promise won't go through? Because I think there are a lot of retired Utahns here.
About cutting the tax on Social
Security? This tax on Social Security. So that may have to be on the cutting block and not pass the session if they're giving a raise to teachers. Or can they keep them both?
Well, I want to touch on the teacher raise thing.
Yeah, go for it.
To that topic. So from my perspective, teachers were going to get a raise. That's just what was going to happen. What I really wish they would do is address market compensation. There are some teachers, due to their skills, due to the demand, due to the shortage, they deserve to be paid more. That's what the market dictates, and they're not fixing that problem. When they raise it for all teachers, rather than targeting the areas where they have serious hotspots and they're having challenges recruiting, talented teachers, you got to fix that problem, and they continue to not address that problem because it's a harder problem to solve, and it's just easier to say we gave the same amount to everybody.
Yeah.
Going back to the tax, the simple fact, there's a narrative out there as we tax Social Security. Well, a huge amount of those that receive Social Security don't pay tax on it because we have a progressive income tax. I ran the bill, the Huntsman tax reform. So, if you're low mid to middle income and you're receiving Social Security, not paying a tax on it.
So how much do you have to be making to be paying a tax on it?
It depends. Sometimes it's $70K.
Yeah.
Or less. Once you get to $70K, then you start kicking in, and it all depends on various other factors. But this is one of those things. Really, what we're talking about is, for a soundbite, we want to cut taxes on the wealthy, and there are certain folks. I'm sorry, Mitt Romney. I don't think really needs to have a tax cut on his Social Security. Yet that is what the legislature and that's what the governor is talking about when they're talking about this. I totally understand if we're going to cut taxes on middle income and low income folks or cut taxes across the board, I'm all for it. But I like a broad base and a low rate, not cherry picking this little earmark and this little earmark, especially when it's not about good tax policy. It's about a soundbite to just say, oh, we're not taxing it. Let's focus on the good tax policy.
So right now, you would say that we're taxing, but taxing fairly responsibly because most people then are not paying a tax on Social Security.
We're not caring about what kind of income it is. We're taxing based on the amount of income that you have.
Coming in.
And it wasn't going to happen. So that's what's interesting is there was no consensus in the body that would have to pass this. So it really was a political talking point going in. And so I would disagree with those who are framing it as, well, we did this admirable thing for teachers, and that's why we can't do this. I mean, it wasn't in play in a meaningful way legislatively.
Okay.
The Social Security cut.
So we'll have to see how it goes. One thing that passed this week that I believe is headed to the governor's desk for approval now is Lincoln Fillmore's bill that would make Utah's primary and secondary classroom cell phone free zones. During classroom instruction periods, you can still have your phone in case of emergency or in the hallways at recess, whatever in between. Mr. Frugal Dougall, is this the right answer?
So it's interesting. For years, PTA Day on the Hill, I hosted a mock debate. And the topic that I'd like to debate, I got the most response from students, was about debating cell phones in classrooms. and who should set the rules and whether they should be or not. And the overwhelming majority was, we want cell phones there. Not just the kids, parents as well. And even many of the teachers. Ironically, they talk about the interruptions or disruptions to classroom instruction, but recognize all sorts of other factors. So when you talk about for emergencies, where's the line for emergency? You know, doesn't that just mean every kid's going to have a phone anyway? And then the other question I would ask is, I get that phones are kind of addictive, especially at that age, but what is it about schooling that schooling is so boring that we would much rather be on our phones than engage in other activities? And so there's lots of factors that come into play. We'll have to see what plays out. I prefer other alternatives than the legislature passing a mandate on this type of thing, but we'll see what
I
plays out.
think they ended up with a pretty good bill. This is the third version, the third legislative year of a bill like this. I do think our thinking over the last 10 years has really changed, and then really particularly in the last couple of years, I think a lot of us have changed.
I think the science has caught up and we've realized what problems come with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope what happened to the bill keeps happening, which is, I hope this is a piece of legislation that gets reviewed in a year, just for those practical applications.
Yeah.
There were tons of concessions made. There was a lot of rewriting on this. You saw bipartisan support at the end of the day for this. And I think I agree with the legislative reflex here to do something. I hope what's followed up is, let's not make people be perfect. Let's not make the legislation be perfect. Let's review it, make sure we look at it. I do think those concessions, those exceptions, had to be in there. I don't know if they're perfect, and I don't know if the statute is well written. A lot of these statutes are first of. A lot of technology statutes are first of. So I do think this warrants an active review of, was it written well? Was it executed well? Does it still have some local control? Do parents feel like they can make choices? Do kids feel safe? All that. But I do think the research is showing, and I don't know why I'm for kids not having access all the time.
I think it's good.
I'm going to take her phone away, Maura.
Yeah,
Young
you
lady.
probably should.
I think one thing it does give you
benefit
is
from
permission for teachers to not be the bad guy and be the mean teacher that says you can't have them, and just say,
Right.
sorry, no phones in class. And I think sometimes I would like to be grounded from my phone and someone take it away from me, whether it's in a meeting or someplace else, so you can just sit and concentrate and do, because it's easy to be distracted. And I think we're all addicted to looking and clicking, even if there's no reason to look at your
To
phone
John's
just
point,
because
though,
you want to.
it is an infringement, so we should be very careful whenever the government is looking at sort of official infringements. And so I think it is an area we should go gingerly into.
Yeah, and there can be adjustments. I would like to see if it happens. I would like to go in the school halls and watch and see what happens, to see if kids leave classroom and they want to go outside and use that, few minutes in between class to talk to their friends, or if they immediately swipe up and start clicking, yeah. Which will they be
Cell phoning
hungry
in the
for?
bathroom, it's a new thing.
Yeah.
So.
The bathroom, yes.
But one of the key things that I always wonder, big picture, is, okay, what is broken at the local level in terms of governance that the legislature has to write in to fix something? Whether
Well,
that's
I mean, if
Congress,
we
whether
took
that's
that
the state
screen,
leg-
this could be the theme for everything
Well,
our
no, I
legislature
always
does.
ask
We're
that.
such activists at our legislature. Ironically, our uber conservative legislators are some of the most activist government asserters. And I think if they actually screened themselves, we would have half the bills that we will have in this.
We need a few libertarians up there.
We do need a few libertarians.
All right, we'll work on that. A bill removing fluoride from water has passed both houses, headed to the governor's desk as well. The big question there is if he'll sign this one or not. The American Dental Association sent a letter to the governor this week encouraging him to veto, saying there's proven reason why we're doing this and putting it in the water. It's great for teeth. On the opposite end, we've talked about this before, but when you're putting something in your body, it could be good for your teeth, but bad for your thyroid, bad for your brain, whatever. So the question is, do we keep doing it? Let cities and counties decide. And any whisperings up on the Hill that you're hearing right now that the governor's going to sign or not sign on
I
this?
haven't heard anything about the governor's response. I look at this as, I'm not sure. I mean, I understand why dentists say they want it in there, but you can take supplements. There's other ways to get fluoride, and it doesn't have to be in the water.
I wish they would have written that in, though. I mean, that is the interesting thing, is it felt like you could take care of the dental concerns and the public water system concerns. Because a lot of people, it was the means of delivery, not necessarily, and some people have fluoride concerns, but it seemed like you could have split that discussion. Nobody ever seems to do it. I will say, the group that's opposing, the group that wants to maintain fluoride where it is now, is is really passionate about this issue. So I suspect this isn't going away.
Yeah.
And that it'll still stay around for debate.
And I think it's one of those things you could reassess as well. Like if they're actually tracking this on the Utah level or whatever, I think you could probably track and see if all of a sudden, tooth decay is going up, or if there's, problems that pop up and you need to reassess. But it is the only quote unquote medication that's put into a water supply across the country. So, and we all know back in the 80s, we popped the pink, pill at breakfast that was your dose of it that you needed. And
I'm not sure what this is.
You never did?
No.
Why?
Please tell me about it.
The pink tablets?
I don't recall taking them.
Yeah. I had my pink tablet and my
But I didn't grow up
Flintstone
in
vitamin
Utah.
every morning. Oh, you
I
didn't?
didn't grow up here either, and they popped me a pink tablet.
Yeah, so I had the pink fluoride when I was growing up. So I do think there's a lot of questions, and I think if you were to ask my dentist, he'd say, yeah, stick it in there, it's good for your teeth. And if you were to ask my autoimmune doctor who deals with my thyroid, he'd be like, let's get it out. It'll be better for autoimmune disease. So I think it depends on who you're talking to. So
yeah, and I think that is the debate. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we're going to go through a national debate of a lot of additives and a lot of what's good for us. And I think it's a challenge now.
Yeah.
You can find half a dozen and six on almost any supplement or any guide. I will say anecdotally, so it should be thrown out, but this is what the sponsor said. Whenever I go to the dentist here, I open my mouth and they say, oh, you didn't grow up in Utah. Where did you grow up? And it's because of my enamel, and they just assume.
You've got great teeth.
Good, nice enamel, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah, there you go. But I think this debate is not over, is what I'll
In
say.
a lot of countries in yesteryear, people would check you out and decide if you were a good bride or worth having as a wife by looking at your teeth. So you would have been like one of those 66,000 cow wives then.
Wow.
Yeah, good
Seen the
teeth.
movies.
Yeah. So anyhow, show me your teeth. All right. Well, we'll wait and see.
Not Mahana.
Yeah, what the governor signs. He has signed, I think, a couple dozen bills at this point. That was not on the list yet, so he is thinking about that one. A new bill right now, Speaker Schultz just dropped this one. It was a surprise to me. It would change the responsibility for writing the ballot language back to the Legislative Council.
It surprised you?
It surprised me, but they got burned by this, and I guess, I don't know, it seems like the legislature wants more control on a lot of issues, but this one does seem like there was a lesson learned. So you think this was you saw this coming after they
I think there was an element
screwed
where
up?
last year they thought this would be a great idea. Didn't turn out so well. And so to have them think again and say, maybe we want to give it back to our staff, didn't surprise me.
So I'm going to give my friend, Speaker Schultz, a rare attaboy, because I later plan on attacking him.
High five, cowboy.
Yeah, he did what I like to see leaders do. He said, listen, we made a mistake. And he would point out that the legislation that allowed the Speaker and the President to write it on their own happened before Amendment
before
D.
they knew about Amendment
But
D.
he
Yeah.
said, we made a mistake here, and we see that mistake being played out in Amendment D. I appreciated not only is he reversing that, but he acknowledged that it wasn't the right way to go. And I think a leader who looks at the results, responds to those results, and acknowledges that should be rewarded. We should stop punishing people who say, yeah, I corrected. And so I appreciate not only that they are authorizing a correction, that they're acknowledging a correction when these things.
Yeah.
Well, to Maura's point, this is why you want to watch the legislative process over a period of time. You don't want to judge a session in the middle of it, at the end of it, and oftentimes you want to judge a legislature over multiple years to see what plays out.
Yeah.
What corrective action have they done? Did they over-respond here? Did they pull back there to correct?
Yeah. So a little correction happening here. We'll watch that. On the opposite end, there's been some debating going on with a few things that are going on with election law. HB100, I know a lot of people have been paying attention to, and the House and the Senate have gone back and forth on this. They come up with some middle ground on it, negotiated a new version. It would require Utah voters to write the last 4 digits of their government-issued identification card, so probably your driver's license, on your ballot and your return envelope here to make sure that it's counted and that it's a real human and that it adds up to someone. Is this the right way to do it, Maura?
I think this is where we often are at the legislature. It's better than we were a month ago. So it is not a bill. I still think they're solving a problem that doesn't exist. And I still
What
think,
is that problem from your perspective?
They're saying, I don't think there is a problem.
Yeah.
They would tell you the problem is one of ballot security, even though I don't think with 207 audits that there was really a statistical.
I only did
I know. You
110
did
of
one,
those.
Ledge Research did one.
I did 3
and I
aspects,
don't
but yeah.
think that proved out for those people who really dig into data. I don't think those audits are intended to point out flaws. And what they did is take audits and say, oh, we need to change the system. I think the audit was showing actually how to improve the system. So one, I would stipulate, I'm not one who thinks there's a problem. Having said that, a month ago, this bill was gutting vote by mail, and now it does not. And so it's one of those tricky things where I want to say, for most people, the process worked, and it's not perfect, but it's a bill that most people can live with. One, vote by mail stays in place. There's about 5 deadlines in this bill that will make it challenging. There's some onus on the clerks that they probably don't like, but the onus is something they could do. It's not going to be too expensive. It's a little more in the audit.
I thought it would help them because I was thinking sometimes they can't match up signatures or they have problems with that.
That's the signature
so wouldn't this
part.
make it a little easier because then you can at least double check on someone
Well,
to have their
there's some irony.
numbers?
Remember, I'm trying to be positive. There's some irony that the signature is flawed, but me writing in 4 numerical digits is not flawed because, there's no way I can figure out what the last 4 of your
Driver's license.
I mean, it seems like that's why I'm like, okay, but I'm going to take the fix because I feel like it's a compromise. The part later in the bill, a couple of parts we're not talking much about, is that there are some qualifications for how the clerks will process, and I think that will end up being good. There's a couple of other lines in there. I'm concerned and disagree with the line in which clerks now need to report back to the federal government about documentation status. I think that is a mix of state and national that I don't like. And then the one thing at the bottom, and I'm not sure, I felt like there was a remedy in there for the lieutenant governor, and once again it asserts the superiority of the legislative branch, in which if the state is going through an election challenge, the governor would need to review it, but there's a little line in there that now the state legislative council would need to review it. They're not the binding authority. I feel like that is a little bit of a dig at the executive branch that the legislature has wanted to do in elections, and frankly, if that's the worst they're going to do to the LG, I'll take the compromise. I'll take all 3 of those compromises on HB 300.
What do you think?
So one of the key things, there are some people that are very concerned with the integrity of the election. So things that help improve the integrity of the election are beneficial because it helps them better accept. If we don't trust our elections and we don't have confidence in it, then it undercuts the governance and integrity of the governing process. And to Maura's point, there were areas where there were weaknesses, and there were clearly areas that they were thrown out of proportion, that the risks weren't there that they thought were there. One of the concerns that I have, though, is, okay, your driver's license was never meant to be a universal ID. And each year we amp it up more and more and more as this universal ID. And now I'm disclosing at least part of my driver's license number, most likely, on a ballot. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming it's going to be on the outside of the envelope, which is, now from a privacy perspective, why are we going down this path? And we can't quite figure out privacy
I hadn't
versus
thought about the
transparency.
outside. Interesting. Okay.
And so this is where I look and I go, we have now thrown the driver's license into a role that it was never intended to be, and we've had to, under the Real ID Act that the federal government passed and the Utah legislature pretended like they repealed, but they didn't really. We now have to give even more information to the government about, you want your driver's license, you got to give me your birth certificate, your social security card, et cetera, et cetera. Well, at the same time, they talk about privacy, but it's like we're whipsawing back and forth. Are we focused on privacy? And we can have privacy and election integrity, but I don't think they're stepping back to look at the bigger picture.
All right,
Yeah.
something to think about there. All right, so that one has not officially passed yet. It's headed in that direction,
But it is a
but yes.
consensus bill at this point.
Yeah, so it looks like it
has-
probably will. So it's been debated out. Speaking of debates, the debate commission overhaul bill, this one surprised me and didn't surprise me all at once because it seems like,
You've done debate commissions.
yes,
before.
nobody wants to participate in the debates anymore, which is crazy to me on a national level and on a local level. It's just like, well, they're not doing a good job. We're going to do our own, which is frustrating because here in Utah, we have an independent debate commission. All the news stations take part in this. There's a big roundtable of conversation and who is there. I think they generally do a good job. I would like to see some of the debates in a longer format. Sometimes it feels like it's not enough time for that, but I think they've done a good job. This bill, though, the legislature wants to give a little power back to the party, it seems. This is HB 557. It would replace the Utah Debate Commission with a new 11-person committee with members appointed by the governor, the Speaker of the House, Senate President, and minority leaders in the House and the Senate to oversee election debates. It would cost about $600,000. is there a good reason, John, that we should be doing this, or is the debate commission doing a good enough job?
The debate commission is doing a mixed job. I think generally trying to be, impartial in a debate, I think they're doing all right. But the problem is they started injecting themselves into the primary process, which is not where the debate commission was supposed to be.
Defined injecting themselves into the primary process.
Well, they held debates in the most recent election cycle during the primary. Not during the general election, but during the primary. And for a lot of us, we were going, well, this isn't really the debate commission domain. It's the general election, which is the debate commission domain. The other thing that comes into play is they inject themselves in certain races, but not in other races. And I'll give the example. The state auditor Tina Cannon wanted to have a debate, and they did not want to do a debate at all for the state auditor. It's an elected statewide position. They had a contested primary, and the debate commission was refusing to do it. And okay, if you're going to do a debate commission, you would think you'd be doing all the statewide officials.
Yeah. And they just were like, auditors are boring, you do math and we don't want to hear what you have to say.
Something like that.
Zip it, auditors.
Yeah, so I also am mixed on this. I mean, I think the reality is the current debate commission had lost the trust of the Republican Party, and you have to have a cooperator in these party systems. And for a lot of highly political reasons, that the legislature and the Republican Party had lost confidence in the debate commission. It is arguably a little too big of a board. Sometimes their process is a little hard to follow. But to your point, the intent was good. The people cared. It really matters that the partners of the debate commission are the press. And I think that component, and then also every university was a heavy participant. And I think
because they kind of spread them out where they went.
I think the press and the universities are really good partners in having public discussions. And I just was a little frustrated that the reflex of the legislature who's not pleased with an independent person is to take it all back and do this formula of, okay, Speaker, Governor, President get 2 appointees, then the minority. Like, it's just so formulaic. I wish there was a heavier effort, and maybe this is on behalf, I have not been a part of the internal discussions, maybe the debate commission wasn't responsive, but I wish they would have said to the debate commission, here's our expectations, please change, here's how you're going to earn our confidence back. But instead now you have a debate commission that's basically controlled by the legislature. And will it lack that independence? Will it have true partnerships with the media that I think are essential? And can you bring in academics and researchers from the universities, political scientists, and can you not lose those really good components while also maintaining the trust of the players? And the players are the parties and the people getting elected.
Well, let me ask a question. And I would really love to know this, having been in the debate commission debate last, I think it was in June, but it's for Congress. How many people actually watched? How many people watched live? How many people watched after the fact? I have no clue whether I was basically talking to a blank TV camera or whether anybody was really caring about what we had as a debate.
I think that should be a variable, but to be honest, I think in an open republic democracy, one should offer that opportunity. Yeah. And I agree with you.
Well,
they should do a format that's engaging, but I am not for lowest common denominator communications because we will make it shorter and quicker and higher, and I do not agree with that. So I think that there's a civic obligation of the government and people who care about civics to give us a hearty debate. And then there's a discussion about how to get people to watch it. But even if 7 people watched it, I feel like it's worthy. And the one thing I will say I like about this bill is there's a $600,000 appropriation.
Yeah.
So one can assume that they're going to invest in this. And I like that. I hate this formula of instead of really working with civic leaders, the legislature tends to say, oh, we know best. We will control it all. We are going to take it all back in.
Absolutely. And there definitely needs to be improvements. And I think one of the frustration that goes on in Utah is that oftentimes elections have been decided before you make it to that November election. Sure. And so there's a desire to have those primary debates, but then the question is the debate commission the right option, or should the party decide who they want to debate because it's still their party, duking it out? And so I think there's definitely questions to be answered. I think there's better ways to do it. So I think having this conversation is good. I'll be interested to see how it shakes out and if they end up with something better in the end.
Would you do debates for the different House races and different Senate races in the state?
Yes.
I mean,
Oh, you mean
right
on the
now we-
legislative level?
At the legislative level. Right now, we ignore that, but should we?
It would be an interesting idea. I guess it comes down to physical time, because I look at my station and I do all of our congressional interviews, and I don't do a lot of the legislative interviews because I just don't have time with anchoring shows. But even when I was looking at the congressional Senate races and just like governor, like just those top races that largely the state would be interested in, there were so many candidates that just with my own time, I had to decide at some point that I wasn't going to do those primary interviews because there were so many candidates this time. I couldn't do it. So I ended up doing the interviews once we made it to the November election. So I'd love to see it on the legislative level too, but there's only so many hours in a day, I guess, is part of the problem of trying to fit them in and make it fair so everyone's lit the same way on the set, So I think there's logistical issues that come with it. But I do think that sometimes people go into those legislative races not very educated, and having an ability to hear those conversations would be awesome. So I don't know what the right answer is for that. Yeah.
I would love to see, with technology, there is probably a hybrid system for the 104 legislative races in which maybe you go on and self-record. Yeah, it's not perfect, but I do think that there's a need. I've been long frustrated with the disproportionality of how much local races matter and how little coverage they get. And I think the main reason for coverage is the logistics.
Yeah.
The other reason is it's perpetual. We don't cover them, so we don't know enough about them, so they're not interesting.
Yeah.
And yet, the presidential is not as impactful, but we know so much about it, we tune into that telenovela. I think if we could inform people more about local races, they become more interesting because we're following more. And
each
understand
community
the
has issues, yeah.
Yeah, and so if we could use the debate commission and maybe technology, it wouldn't be perfect. Not everyone would get a well-lit stage for their debate.
Yeah.
But if we could use technology and a debate commission to offer that as a place that had a little better resources.
I think,
But as a
yeah.
candidate, we could only share it as it was. So, hey,
That's
folks,
right.
here's a 1 hour debate. I couldn't cut it down to here's 5 minutes for this one question, and
Yeah.
we all answer the question. Here's the question. Couldn't cut it down like that. I couldn't even cut it down to just my answer. It was here's an hour or nothing.
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and I think that's one thing that COVID maybe taught us is that you can get people from different parts of the state easily on Zoom, and so I think that could be one way they could do it, where they could provide, maybe a certain amount of days in a month, and they just give an hour to each of those, and then kind of do it where they get them to join on Zoom, have the conversation. They're online if people want to watch, because educating yourself on those local races is not as easy as you'd like it to be. Not everyone can go to those meet and greets, and it's a great way to hear the
I would like
questions.
them to see, it's not going to happen, but I would love to see them insert in the bill a role for universities and the media as well.
Yeah.
The other thing I would like in a debate is more like this. We have a more extended discussion of issues rather than here's 30 seconds. Maura, give me your soundbite.
Well,
Then you've
Heidi and I
practiced many
both
times
moderated,
before.
right? I moderated the
Yeah.
Attorney General race this year, and it's a balance, right? You have
Yeah.
to control. You want to give equality, matters, but it ends up when a debate, when a good exchange happens, you're like, oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time, and then people are answering these very formulaic questions,
Yeah.
and then the audience isn't very engaged.
Yeah, and sometimes, the question is, can you do more with more time? And the answer is yes. When we did that, we've only done one KUTV debate, which I loved doing the gubernatorial debate in the primary, where we sat down and just kind of talked back and forth the issues that were really specific to each candidate, and then we let them debate overall, which was nice. But it's definitely more time to do that,
And that format,
yeah.
though, was so much more engaging.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Because you could dig
interesting to
into
listen
things.
to,
So,
dig in
yeah, so I'd
and
like to
follow
see
up.
that. Yeah, because that was the frustration. And I think as we get more and more people on the ballots, the primaries, I love having more candidates. But then you have to allow more time. When you only have an hour and then you've got 5 people on the stage, you just don't have time to get meaningful answers. And then you
Right.
get their sound bites that they memorized before. And then I don't know how much that serves anyone. So I hope they work out something great. Judicial retention recommendations. Right now, if you vote for judges on your ballot, I know a lot of people just ignore it. You can go online, and there's a review process online where they look at judges and they give them either a pass or a fail of whether they're recommended to move.
Not quite pass fail, but
Yeah.
whether they recommend to retain them or not.
Yes, that's a better way
It's
to
a score.
describe it. Yeah.
They give you a score based on a handful of criteria as it's been going on. They review them and they post them online.
Yeah.
And many judges, if they see that they're not going to recommend retaining them,
They'll just
choose to
retire. Yeah. So I do like having that option. This would be new. The Utah Supreme Court, though, not thrilled. Chief Justice Durant met with Speaker Schultz and President Adams yesterday, delivered a letter opposing Lisenby's House Bill 512. It would allow legislators a say in judge retention elections. And if I understand this bill correctly, they'd be able to write on the ballot about whether or not you should keep them. Am I understanding that one correctly? Anyone have looked at that one closely?
Yeah, I haven't read her last version, so
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to say. But it essentially allows for the legislature to weigh in.
To share their opinion.
Yes, and I pulled up Durant's, it's all over social media, but they made a great case, and the center of his case is judicial independence is not conferred so that judges may do as they please. It is conferred so that they can do what they must. And this fundamental notion of the judiciary sitting alone and the other branches sitting alone, they also talk a lot about the judiciary doesn't have the purse or the sword. So it's an old adage that the executive branch has a sword and the legislative branch has a purse, and what the judiciary has is public trust. And when you insert partisan politics,
Yeah.
anywhere close to that, you run the risk of losing the trust. And you see that a little bit in the discussion we're having for the very first time on the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court's doubt is coming from participation in partisan politics. And it is not intended that the judiciary, I also feel like I'm sort of very suspect of the rationale for it. And from my seat, the rationale is that the legislature didn't like some of the judicial rulings. It wasn't, I don't think it's merit-based. I think it's very personal, and we just didn't like what you're doing, so we're going to hem you in. So I feel like this is an ill-intended bill that is really striking at the fundamental differences between the branches. And that is played out in seeing that we're hearing voices that never come out. The Supreme Court does not weigh in on politics. And the fact that they felt like they needed to make a strong statement just about being able, I love his phrase in saying, not the job we want, but the job we must do. They really take it. And if you have any friends I have a number of friends who are judges, they will not talk to you about politics. Like, it is not something, even in private. The judges take very seriously the role of independence and neutrality on political topics and therefore partisan politics.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. Nationally,
One of the dynamics I'm just going to highlight, the legislature is a body that looks at the future. The executives are individuals that look at the present. They act today. The judiciary really looks at the past. Things that have happened, and they're opining on it and issuing their decisions based on that. But clearly, the legislature and many Utahns are frustrated with some recent rulings coming out of the court, especially the Supreme Court.
But frustration is not, this is a harmful bill that fundamentally strikes against the balance of power. And it's the zeitgeist of the moment. Like, we have no impulse control, we have no perspective, and we're confusing disagreement. And this is a legislature that clearly is never told no. And these toddlers need to be given a timeout. They were given a timeout, and now they're having a temper tantrum. And this lack of really legislative understanding and intent is concerning, because I disagree with many bills, but there's a philosophy there, right? And I disagree with it, but I go, oh, you know what? I get what you're doing. I would
disagree.
Yeah, but no problem. I don't think it's fundamentally wrong. When you mess with fundamental process is what democracies are made of. And this is a really harmful bill.
do we think it's fed maybe by what we're seeing on a national level with Trump's executive orders and judges putting holds on those, where maybe they are acting a little bit with a sword and trying to stop some of what he's
John's
trying
been
to
on
do?
both sides of this. He's been both a legislator and then he's been elected on the executive side for quite a while. But I think this is a continuation of a decade of this particular legislative body taking more and more and more and more. And when they're frustrated with things, the answer is give us the control.
Let us be in charge.
I think we know better. We know better than local jurisdictions. We know better than counties. We know better than cities. We know better now than the judiciary. We know better than the debate commission. I do think that this has been a theme for this particular legislative body for a decade.
So maybe this is why they do need debates, because they're really changing the world and how the states run, so you should know who you're voting for.
There you go.
Yeah.
There were some dynamics about the nominating process for judges to get up to the governor, and there was some, what I would say, built-in bias into that process that the legislature has tried to correct. I'm not sure how effective that's been. Clearly, they're wanting to jump to the other end, which is how do we deal with retention and better inform the public, because you mentioned a lot of people just skip over it.
Yeah.
Which says they don't really know how to vote, so they just ignore it, which
Yeah,
says it's not really effective.
And that's important in a different process, but because we have a retention process that has been in place, like if we had nothing, if there was no
way to
that
judge,
the public could go and review these judges, but we have that in place. And if you want to change that, if you want to get involved in JPAC, then do. But this.
The interesting thing is, legislators already could opine on whether to retain judges or not.
Nothing stops. I mean, they could spend
So
all of
it's
their time.
interesting.
You take their bully pulpit and spend all of their time telling us about these judges if they would like.
give them a podcast. Another bill right now, gun education.
Court two.
Court two, yes. Gun education in schools. There's debate over whether this is a good idea, where we should be teaching kids about guns,
Where do
or
we sign up for this?
to keep this out. Yeah, so the idea is it could go in as young as kindergarten. This reminds me a little bit of the DARE program. I knew nothing about drugs as a kid. I just didn't live in that world. And I remember them bringing in like these like pipes and like a razor and a piece of glass and stuff. And I was like, what? How do you do this? And I felt like they were like teaching me how to do drugs. And I'm like,
Turns out they were.
Yeah. So I was like,
this is the thing. In
So I
hindsight,
don't-
DARE was teaching kids to get
So
interested in
true.
do
yeah,
drugs.
so I don't know if it was good or bad. I look back and I'm like, I don't know, but I was just like, you do what now, and how do you do that? And so I don't know if it was good or bad. I still don't
Yes.
do drugs. I
Yes,
didn't do
Mom.
drugs then.
Yes, Mom.
Yes. So I don't know if this is a
Listen to me.
comparison. I would assume you'd have to bring guns into school to be able to teach gun safety, right?
I'm not even going to the curriculum. This is ridiculous. This is, you choose to own a gun or not. All I hear from gun owners are, you can't restrict my right, and as long as I'm law-abiding and adhering, well, then create laws that make you teach your children to, but why did this end up in public school? How on earth did you say that this should have the price tag? I keep hearing about STEM. We've spent 2 years telling teachers what they should teach in areas that we have no right. How is this an area we have a right to tell teachers what to teach? How can we tell them not to teach about history? How can we tell them not to teach about all these other things? And then with all the hypocrisy we can muster, we're like, you know what, you shouldn't be teaching all that. Let me get really prescriptive with you on reading, math, and arithmetic, and also gun safety. So if you are a law-abiding, caring gun owner in Utah, of which 42% of Utahns are, then teach your darn kids how to be safe around guns, but it's your own business. That's the whole genesis of the Second Amendment, is that it's your own business and
This
it's
should be
your
your
own
family home evening.
responsibility. And it is not my responsibility to have my tax dollars spent on you not teaching your children about guns. And you don't need to bring this into the curriculum of the state. You cannot have the hypocrisy of going over and over about instructing students and teachers about what you have the right to learn, and then pop this out as an exceptional area of information. And the argument is that a bunch of kids are being killed, but you know what? A bunch of kids are getting pregnant, and a bunch of kids are dying of drug overdoses, and we don't care about that in our curriculum. It's the hypocrisy that is just kicking my butt right now.
So if we start doing sex education,
then maybe
real
I'll
sex
talk about
education.
the bill. If you can,
Bring it-
There you go.
guns.
There. What gun are we talking about? So here's where I'm going to agree somewhat with you. I mean, gun owners should teach their kids how to handle them responsibly. Absolutely. They shouldn't pass the buck, just like so many other things. They shouldn't pass the buck onto the public education system. Expect them to raise their kids. But I also come from the perspective which is, we need more diversity in terms of what classes we're teaching. And we get too prescriptive about the limitations of what's offered in the local
legislature's
schools.
only
So
telling
let-
us they want to
let-
limit the perspective we have on what we're
So
teaching.
let the communities expand out the offering of what classes they have and what electives are there. And if somebody wants to opt into this class, great. If they don't want to, great, so be it.
Hey, if
But
a
let's
teacher
have,
wants
let's have
to-
more offerings.
So who makes that decision? The superintendent, the principal, or the teacher?
I think it should go all the way down to the school level. And teachers should pitch to the school, hey, I want to teach this class, and see if kids want to sign up for whatever that class happens to
I
be.
might, by that
So for
law,
like an
this-
after-school thing or like an in-school?
It could be in school, it could be after school. I mean, we blur the line between curricular and extracurricular.
So could I do that with other topics? Or
Yeah,
is it,
yeah, lots of topics.
I mean, like, see, look, John and I are problem solving here.
Like you could do your own sex ed class at your local school,
That's right.
taught by Maura. I'd come to
That's
that.
right.
Let-
And
Yeah.
let
I'm
people
going
know
to
and
teach
let
sex
people
ed, I'm
opt in
going
or
to
not
teach
opt in.
underwater basket weaving, and I'm going to teach about history of America that actually happened.
What is so popular about underwater basket weaving?
It's the
Just funny
euphemism
to
for
say.
things that the legislature doesn't value.
Yeah.
All the things I care about.
One thing I know that has been a hot topic is more spending for school lunches. That passed the House. That's HB100. Hasn't passed the Senate yet, so we'll be watching that one. Another Utah bill would create tax zones to fund Olympic-related infrastructure, which just brings random thoughts to me. Are you now on a committee for the Olympics for
I'm on
2034?
the steering committee. for
High
the
five, you
20.
awesome.
Yeah.
What
I
does that
know.
mean?
That's a fine question.
You're there for whatever. You know the story well. What does that
Yeah,
mean?
we had our first meeting on Wednesday. It went well.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this something you were lobbying for, or they just came and sought you out and said,
Yeah, there's
you've
not
seen
really
Olympic?
a formal process, and it's not. There's the board.
So it wasn't the governor picked a couple, the speaker picked a couple,
Yeah, I'm
the
sure.
Senate
No,
president.
for sure it was. For sure it was, John. This is the main board, which we heard about a couple weeks ago with Brad Wilson. Those are the guys that have voting authority, and this is a broader group that will break into areas and try and expand the point of view that is that's starting to shape out what the Olympics will look like for our citizens. I think we're going to be mostly focused on engaging Utahns in the Olympic process.
How are you going to
Interesting.
make sure, because usually the sequel is not as good as the original.
Yeah, I know.
How are you going to make sure the sequel is better?
Yeah, I think it's that we can't just rest on the past, right? I mean, the reinvention of it is not interesting. It's got to be totally new. It's got to be totally different.
Or Top Gun 2. That's the one time I say that like a
That's
remake
different.
of something,
I'm
they did a
kinda
nice
with
job.
John, though, I just don't. I
It
don't.
wasn't
gotta
better
go-
than the original, but
It wasn't
nice.
better,
It had
but
all
yeah.
the little touches and all of the nostalgia.
Yeah, and given there's a fair chance we won't have snow, that'll be a good reinvention, right there.
There you go.
Little
We
climate
didn't have
change.
snow.
That's all I'm saying.
If you guys don't remember this, but we didn't actually have snow last time around either.
Yeah.
Everyone's freaking out. It was
was
insanely cold. There was no snow, and then finally we got snow. But yeah, it was just like,
It
oh
was.
shoot,
I
we have no
remember that,
snow,
'cause
guys.
that is
Sorry.
high stress right there.
Yeah, it was miserable to be outside. So anyhow, pray for snow, but not yet. Like hold off a little till we get closer to 2034. A bill has died that was trying to give or force homeowners, that is, to sell their homes to a family before investors. Was this the right decision? I feel like you can't really tell people who they can sell to. I know that we want to keep it to families, but if I want to sell my house, I want the money now, and I will take whoever has the biggest check.
That's right, and can pay right now, rather
Yeah.
than, oh, maybe in the future they're going to be able to pay. Yeah, let the free market work. Let the free market work. And part of the problem is we've got so many constraints in other parts of our market when it comes to housing. That's why they're jumping through other hoops to quote unquote fix the problems.
So that's the right policy answer, but I will tell you this brings up a legit problem.
Yeah.
And that I would not be opposed to a public education fund about the ramifications for selling out to multinational corporations.
Yeah.
And how that is going to keep our prices inflated unduly. It's going to tear apart our communities. Second and third homes don't work for communities. So this is a real problem. Telling you who you can sell your house to is not the solution, but it is a real problem.
It is a real problem, yeah. I don't know exactly how you solve that. And I've sold homes a couple times, and when you do, I'm always thinking, I want to pick the nicest people for my neighbors or that have the most amount of kids that match the
Yeah.
ages, because you want to do that for your neighbors, but bottom line, I need the best offer so that I'm not broke and I can go buy another house or do what I have to do. So that's
Right.
the frustration.
So I do think we should keep at chipping at the problem while not messing with the
One of the
market.
biggest problems is supply.
For
Supply.
sure.
Yeah, so they're working on that here in Utah. We're trying to legislate that as well, which isn't working out as well on the local level because people don't want to be told how to use their
That
land.
nice story about that. I want to say it was Lehigh that's doing these 50s.
Yeah,
They said it was
they're calling it
1950s.
post-war style
Yeah,
homes,
which I thought was
which is
great
really just
marketing.
small homes. And actually, I'm on board with that. The whole big home that has the high ceilings and no walls in between it, I'm over it.
For sure.
I want little cozy spaces,
I agree.
guys.
Why are you over it? I mean, the kids are moving out of the house. It should be quiet there.
I know. I have one of those homes. I didn't love it when I bought it, but it was one of those you had to buy because it's what it is, you know, that was available at the time. And I loved the high ceilings and the open rooms. But it's so echoey, and sometimes for decorating purposes, it costs a lot more. So if you have rooms that are separate and the ceilings aren't quite high, but not quite as high, it's easier to like.
That
I
could
don't
be
know.
on the brochure.
Be
Easy
cozy.
to decorate. My
Yes.
cozy home, easy to decorate.
So I'm all over that.
Affordable.
Yeah.
All 500 square feet of it.
Yeah, I know. It'll be basically Sugar House, except for it won't be bougie because it's not Sugar House. You'll just have a small house.
Yeah.
So,
Tiny homes.
yeah.
Well, these are I like
No,
it.
I'm
It was
just saying,
little
you know?
mid-size.
Yeah, so it makes you feel 1950s fun. If you
Yeah.
buy one of the homes, you do have to vacuum and address. and make sure the dinner's on the table by 6 for your husband. I don't know what the rules are.
Wow.
It's
Yes,
the rules.
it's the rules of these homes. Hey, on a national scale, real quickly.
June Cleaver?
Yes, June Cleaver. I've done that a couple times cleaning when I got home from work in a dress, and I'm like, they used to do this? This is garbage.
know.
I need my sweatpants on.
I know. I
Yeah.
remember when Delta, one of my best friends from college got a job at Delta Airlines.
Yeah.
And they still required that women wear, I'm going to use the word because that's what we use then, pantyhose. Every day. Going to your call center job at Delta Airlines.
And your call center job.
Those get expensive. They get snagged. They're
But
no
also,
good.
This is really uncomfortable.
Sweaty.
Yeah.
Squish your guts. Yeah. You should try wearing them.
Yeah,
Men used to wear
nice.
tights back in the day, so they've been there, done that.
Men in Tights.
Yes, the tights.
I heard of that movie.
Men in Tights. The U.S. House also passed a budget proposal. All 4 Utah reps voted in favor. This includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, tax relief for seniors. This is a big wish list. America First tax breaks, balanced budget resolution. But the Senate is completely not on the same page, and we are looming towards that deadline. I think it's March 15th. So are we putting our money on another continuing resolution?
This is an
Will we
outline
solve
of
our
an
problems
outline.
of an
I
outline?
appreciate the marketing
Yeah.
of this, but this was an outline of an outline. This was not any meaningful attempt at shaping out a budget. But hey, Johnson's in a rock and a hard place.
Yeah,
So
he is.
Good for him for getting an outline of an outline.
When the Senate said, pass something, get it over to us. Prove that you can get something over here.
Yeah.
But as I talked earlier, I mean, when you start doing, no tax on tips and so forth, it's like, okay, why are you picking and choosing different types of, this income's good, this income's
Yeah.
bad, rather than just being neutral on it?
But it sounds, it sounds
Oh, I know,
good.
it's a great
I mean,
soundbite.
it's
Sounds
sort
good
of
to the
like
working class.
reading an
Policy.
article about Musk's cuts, and they're going to result to absolutely nothing. But whoa, we feel good. We're pounding our chest.
Yeah. So anyhow, I look forward to the possibility of a government shutdown, another continuing
That'd be good.
resolution, give us
Yeah.
another 2 months or whatever
That's
we're
the way
doing.
to call in spring.
Yeah.
They're gonna have TV2 just pay you in tips.
There you go. I know that's the thing is that I think a lot of people, if they actually pass that, would change how they get paid. And
Yeah.
you'd be
absolutely.
like, you're like, this is free. I'll cut your dog's hair for free. I'll accept tips or
With a
whatever.
mandatory tip.
Yeah. Mandatory tips. Don't leave unless
And
you
they're
have
on
a
the
tip.
wall. I'll tell you what my tips are.
Yeah. I'm going to ask my boss if I can get paid just in tips.
We'd do that. I'd give you cash.
You would?
Yeah.
Like, where people could scan a QR code when they watch the news and, like, send you 50 cents or
That's
whatever?
great. That's
All
There you
right.
go, Chase, that weather report. I don't want more snow. No.
Yeah, like take
Sunshine?
money away.
Great, here you go,
I'll give you
Chase.
$1. So he's going to be praying for no snow. And finally here, the latest in the federal jobs right now, a judge in San Francisco found mass firings of federal probationary workers likely unlawful. It seems like there's a bit of a pause on that, but where that ends up, we don't know yet. But affecting a lot of different industries. Yesterday, there was a lot of talk about the National Weather Service and NOAA starting to see some of those job cuts as well. So
Yeah, I think the ready, fire, aim that we've gone with from the president will likely see some carnage and fatalities along the way.
who do you think the carnage is the most right now? Like, where are you like, oof?
I mean, the judge said it. It was too far, too fast. This notion that every single person who works for the federal government is superfluous and not creating value is just a ridiculous notion. And I think we're going to all start saying it's people who incessantly complain about taxes while they drive on public roads and use public utilities that are underwritten by dollars. And it's like, yeah, no, there's room for cutting, but mindless cutting and disregard for government is not the foundation. And it's inevitably done by hyper users. And
Yeah.
the fact that we don't see the relationship between the services that we enjoy and the lifestyle we enjoy and a well-intended public servant who's working really hard to provide those. So I'm hoping, again, I'm taking the long view when it comes to the Trump administration, but I'm hoping that some of this disruption actually points out the value. Not to say there aren't cuts necessary, but the value that we do see in long-term public servants doing their jobs.
So maybe a little more slow and methodical as we move forward.
That would be thoughtful, would be lovely.
Thoughtful.
I'm all for cutting, but like I said last time, know what you're cutting. If you cut and then a day or two later you got to walk it
Yeah.
back, you're reckless.
Yeah.
Rather than, hey, we know what we're doing and we're doing the right job.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for both being here for part of the conversation. Anything you're watching in this last week or surprises are coming that the rest of us don't know about, Maura?
I mean, my own personal Christmas list is more about some bills not happening than
Yeah.
happening. So that's an okay place. You just
Okay.
fingers crossed on
Yeah.
not seeing some things. I mean, you hit on, I think, these election bills or something that I'm hyper focused on.
Yeah,
and
this
they're
last
being
week.
driven a lot by leadership. I think you still have some hot issues on medical malpractice that are being debated. And right now, as John well knows, money, 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 money is the theme for the last week. And we are going to need to belt tighten.
Yeah.
So we're going to see some programs that we like, and really the competition now. If you don't have a bill that is prioritized, so to speak, then it's probably
Then
done.
mostly kiss it goodbye.
Yeah, and so it's going to be about money, and we are going to have, I think, a smaller budget this year.
The legislature's top responsibility is a budget.
Yeah.
And
Just
we have
like
to get that
Congress,
done.
and we actually do it here in Utah, which is the thing is, as much as you may hate the process up on the Hill,
It works.
they're living on a budget here, and I love
we
that.
are- hear a funny story?
We are
Yeah.
responsible.
My second session, Olene Walker was the governor.
Okay.
She was threatening to veto the entire budget because we weren't doing her reading program. Not
I
just some
remember that.
things, the entire budget.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what to do. I mean, we've never been in this situation of,
Yeah.
what if we end up, she vetoes the whole budget, and we have no budget? What is that like? So we changed the process, and the next year, we adopted a base budget. And sometimes the base budget was the equal of what was before. Sometimes it was a couple percentage points cut in the
Forgot
budget.
about that.
But that allowed us to shift the balance of power with the governor to say, hey, if you want to veto everything in the last day of the session, great, we still have a base budget. The lights will still come on. Most of the employees will still get paid. We view that as more responsible. Now, it wasn't reckless on autopilot like the federal
Yeah.
government does, but it was something that we wanted to make sure we never got in a situation where the session wrapped up, the
Couldn't
governor vetoed
operate.
the budget, and now we enter a world of we're irresponsible.
Yeah. So anyhow, legislators, I know you've been working hard this week, even if we like or dislike some of your bills. Thanks for balancing the budget, making sure there's a check
And
to clear.
thank them for the work. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
grumpy about them, but they don't get paid very much at all, and they are working long hours.
Well,
right
in my
now.
experience is most of them are trying to do the best job they can.
Absolutely.
You know,
They're there because they care.
Exactly.
I'm a poet and I didn't
Most
even know
of
it.
those.
Most of those.
Most of them.
Some of them are there just to
Yeah.
stick it to the man. Who the man is, I don't know. Well, thanks for joining us. Go outside, enjoy the sunshine this week. We'll be back again next week as we wrap up this legislative session.